Jealousy is a terrible, often destructive force that can blind a person and push them to crime. It was jealousy that caused the tragedy that played out in Costa Rica a few years ago. This case went down in the history of forensics as the case of Gerardo Cruz Barquero. But let's talk about everything in order. Samady Fonseca Murillo was born in Costa Rica in February 1975. Little is known about her family and early years. The girl's childhood was in an area called Hatillo, where she lived with her mother, Sonia Fonseca. Samady attended a local school, and even then demonstrated her difficult and conflicted character. She did not tolerate rejection, and often achieved what she wanted by force or deception. According to the memories of local residents, Samady, thanks to her striking appearance and perfect figure, easily charmed men, but could not keep them. Samady was very beautiful, and skillfully used her appearance, but because of greed and vanity, she put material wealth and self-interest above all else, which simply discouraged suitors after a short relationship. In addition, she was incredibly jealous and aggressive. In her youth, Samady Fonseca, thanks to her doll-like appearance, worked for several years as a Barbie in one of the large Universal bookstores. It was then that she received that flattering nickname, which stuck with her for life. Soon after graduating from high school, Samady had an affair with a successful journalist who worked on local television. The man's name was Osvaldo Balerdi, and he was 16 years older than her. It was the longest and most serious relationship for Samady, but her chosen one never proposed to her. In 1996, the couple had a son, and a year later, their daughter, Christel, was born. But because of constant scandals and Samady's jealous attacks, Balerdi left the young woman. In 2012, 53-year-old Osvaldo died suddenly, and as it turned out, he did not include his former lover in his will. The young woman was not going to put up with it, and decided to take matters into her own hands. She went to her former lover's house and essentially seized it, changing the locks so that the deceased's relatives and heirs could not get in. In addition, Samady took some valuable items belonging to the deceased. The Balerdi family was outraged and immediately went to court to punish Samady for the theft. The police forced the young woman to leave the house, but criminal proceedings were not initiated against her. Fonseca had many other romances, including one with Miguel Ángel Pérez, with whom she had her third child, a daughter named Maria. According to some reports, this relationship was officially registered but ended in divorce after a few years, although other sources claim that Samady was never married. At the same time, she gave her youngest daughter her lover's surname without his knowledge or consent. It is a curious fact that some of Barbie's lovers mysteriously disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances. But for a long time, no one paid any attention to it. For example, one of Samady's lovers went missing, and according to relatives, it happened soon after he decided to break up with the irascible and aggressive woman. To this day, the man has not been found, and many are sure that Fonseca is directly related to this case, but no irrefutable evidence of her guilt could be found. Another of Samady's former lovers, whose name was Diaki, died tragically after breaking up with her. He was murdered, and everything looked like a failed robbery attempt. The mysterious killers were never brought to justice. Again, everyone speculated about Samady's involvement in the crime, but no hard evidence was found against her. However, her most famous victim was Gerardo Cruz. Cruz, a native of Costa Rica, was born in December 1992 in the city of San Jose. The boy did not know his own father because he left the family before his son was born. His mother, Ana Patricia Barquero, soon married a man named Hermes Rodriguez, who adopted the baby and raised him as his own. A few years later, Gerardo had a younger sister, Milena. The guy's childhood and youth can be described as a calm and carefree period. He studied at an ordinary school, was fond of motorcycles, and met his true love, a girl named Carol Zuniga, early on. At the age of 22, Gerardo, along with his chosen one and their 4-year-old daughter, Genesis Cruz, settled in his aunt and uncle's house to provide his family with everything they needed. The couple was quite happy. and soon they learned they were expecting their second child. In the summer of 2015, Gerardo met Samadi, who periodically shopped at the bakery where he worked. At that time, the woman was already 40 years old, but she was still quite attractive and loved to wear revealing outfits and flirt. It is worth noting that with age, she began to have affairs with men who were much younger than her, probably because the attention of young lovers flattered her. Despite the nearly 20-year age difference and having a family, Cruz quickly became infatuated with the beautiful woman and began to meet with her secretly. She, in turn, began to visit the bakery almost every day to see her young lover, which did not escape the attention of other employees. In addition, Samadi often appeared accompanied by her eldest daughter, Crystal, who was 18 years old at the time. At first, Gerardo managed to masterfully combine family life and secret meetings with his mistress, so that neither of his women would realize a rival existed. But soon, Gerardo, as they say, let his guard down. Obviously, he wanted to boast about his success with women, and he began to tell friends and colleagues about Samadi, about what a terrific mistress she was, and how she spoiled him with gifts. Rumors quickly reached his mother, who tried to reason with her son and convince him to leave his mistress. The affair lasted only a few months and ended in September of that same year, 2015, when Samadi found out that her lover had a pregnant partner and a young daughter. The woman was furious. She started calling and texting Carol, insulting her and threatening to kill Gerardo if he didn't belong to her alone. Gerardo managed to beg for his partner's forgiveness and keep the family together. As for his former mistress, he did not take her threats seriously, believing she would quickly cool down and find a new boyfriend. He did not even realize how insidious and vindictive Samadi would turn out to be. Just a few days after the breakup with Fonseca, Cruz became an accidental witness to a blatant scene. On October 4th, 2015, as the young man was walking down a downtown street, he saw an older man trailing a young girl, holding his phone so the camera was positioned under her miniskirt. The guy was outraged. He also took out his phone and started filming what was happening, then stopped the girl and told her everything, advising her to go to the police. Cruz then chased the man, trying to capture his face on camera. He chased him for about 2 minutes, wondering loudly if he was having a good time taking pictures of a girl's underwear without her knowledge, until the man jumped into a cab and drove away. That same night, Gerardo posted the video he had made on his internet page, and in just one night, the video went viral, as users quickly identified the man as a former official from the Ministry of Finance named Luis Zambrano Delgado. Soon the media picked up and circulated the video, and Gerardo himself became a national celebrity. The young man was interviewed almost daily for print publications. He was invited to television and radio programs. He talked about the incident he had witnessed, condemned the former official's actions, and said he had no regrets and would do it again. At the same time, experienced lawyers hired by Zambrano Delgado began working against Gerardo, accusing him of wrongdoing. They claimed that the distribution of the videotape made by the guy violated the law, and were preparing a lawsuit against him. Cruz himself was quite surprised by this turn of events and did not understand why he could be judged, and not the man who committed such a disgusting act against an innocent girl. Gerardo gave his last interview on October 7th on a local radio station. He was sure he was right, and believed he had nothing to fear. That same day, Gerardo had arranged to meet his friend Oswald after work, but he abruptly cancelled, citing a sudden emergency. As it later became known, that day he received a message from Samadi, in which the woman tricked him into coming to a park that evening, where he was supposedly going to be interviewed again. Gerardo didn't suspect anything wrong and simply believed his former lover. After his shift ended, he went to the agreed-upon place, but journalists were not waiting for him. Instead, 2 unknown men took his bag, beat him, and stabbed him several times in the chest and stomach before fleeing. The injured man, before losing consciousness, managed to call his friend and report what had happened, and his friend immediately called the police and medics. Thanks to his prompt action, Gerardo was taken to the hospital, where doctors fought for his life for 42 days. During this time, Gerardo underwent dozens of operations, but, alas, they failed to save him. On November 19th, Cruz died in the intensive care unit. Since he had become a real celebrity shortly before the tragedy, the whole country followed his condition. Gerardo's relatives periodically gave interviews asking everyone to pray for his recovery. They themselves did not understand who could do such a thing to Gerardo and why. A lot of people came to the guy's funeral to express their condolences to his family. Everyone also expressed hope that the police would quickly find the killers and that they would be justly punished. Initially, there were several versions of the crime. The first was that it was a robbery murder. Indeed, Gerardo was attacked in a park in the evening. His bag was taken and he was stabbed, so it looked like a common theft. However, just a few days before, Cruz had released a sensational video compromising a nationally known former official. Hence the second theory, a revenge killing. The media openly said and wrote that Zambrano Delgado could well have hired hitmen to eliminate the young man who had ruined his reputation. The murder was hotly debated in the press, and people picketed the streets demanding that the killers be found and jailed. The police began to consider different versions and look for other possible enemies of Gerardo. For several months, the investigation was at a standstill until May 2016, when a video from a street surveillance camera was discovered. The footage showed two men running away from the scene where Cruz was fatally wounded. These men immediately became prime suspects, but it was up to the police to identify and track them down. The tape turned out to be a key piece of evidence, and once it was made public, the case moved forward. It was repeatedly played on news programs, asking viewers to look closely because these could be dangerous criminals. In addition, the police were able to draw up rough sketches of the wanted men and describe their physical characteristics. Soon, the identity of one of the men was established because he decided to go to the police and cooperate with the investigation in the hope that it would help mitigate his sentence. Thanks to the information he provided, the investigation quickly led to several other accomplices, as well as the organizers of the crime, Samadi and her daughter Christel. Soon, all participants in the crime were taken into custody. In addition to the mother and daughter, several other men were arrested. A taxi driver named Ronald Arrieta, who found the perpetrators of the murder. A laborer named Cesar Chavez, who acted as an intermediary. And a young miner who was directly involved in the attack. Omar Falas, who had been following the victim and reporting his whereabouts on the day of the attack, was also later arrested. The roles and connections of all the participants in the crime were established through phone calls and text messages. The murder was ordered by Samadi, who had carefully planned the whole thing, including her daughter Christel in the details. Together they turned to their friends Ronald and Cesar to help them find a couple of hitmen to kill Gerardo and make it look like a robbery gone wrong in a park at night. They were later joined by Omar, who had to make sure the victim went to the agreed-upon location. Samadi chose the date of the massacre herself, October 7th. On that day, she repeatedly contacted all the participants in the crime, assigned roles, and made sure that everyone followed the plan. In addition, the woman demanded that after committing the crime, they bring her something of her former lover's belongings as evidence. Cruz, after working his shift, headed straight for the park. He was sure he was going for an interview, so he tried not to be late. But at the agreed-upon place, he was attacked, stabbed several times, and then his bag and jacket were taken and given to the customer as evidence. The main evidence of Samadi's guilt was the text messages in which the murder plan and the roles of each of the participants were described in detail. The woman was so confident in her impunity that she did not even bother to delete them. The motive for committing such a grave crime was banal jealousy. The woman did not want to share a lover with his partner, and decided that if he was not with her, then no one would have him. She thought everything through and involved her own daughter, who helped her in every way in her criminal plan. The mother and daughter were immediately taken into custody, and releasing them on bail was out of the question, as the criminals would probably try to escape, and leave the country. Their accomplices also ended up in pre-trial detention, except for Omar, who was in charge of surveillance. The youngest participant in the crime was handed over to authorities specializing in juvenile delinquency. The investigation lasted about a year and a half, and only in December 2017 did the trial of all participants in the criminal conspiracy begin. In addition, it turned out that Samadi had previously been brought to criminal responsibility several times. In particular, she was arrested for forging documents to receive state payments, but she got off with only a fine. Also, the story of Miguel Ángel Pérez, the father of Samadi's youngest daughter, surfaced. As it turned out, the woman gave the child her former lover's surname without his consent, and then, through the court, obtained alimony from him, which she received for more than 3 years. When it turned out that the whole procedure was falsified, the swindler was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a large fine. But the court took into account that she had a small child and commuted the sentence to a suspended 5-year sentence. At the trial, Gerardo's partner admitted that she knew about his affair with Samadi and that the former mistress had threatened him with death, but he did not pay much attention to the threats. The main motive for the crime, as already mentioned, was jealousy, and the wounded pride of a woman who could not accept that her young lover preferred to stay with his partner. Thanks to phone records, it was found that the mother and daughter planned the crime together. It also became known that after the release of the CCTV footage that captured the killers, Christelle had a nervous breakdown. She called her mother, sobbing, and was on the verge of going to the police to confess. But her mother calmed her down, assuring her that the investigation would never get to them. The verdict was announced on January 23, 2018. According to the court's decision, Samadi was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Her daughter, as well as Ronald and Cesar, each received 25 years in prison. One of the killers went to a juvenile detention center, and the second was not found at that time. Omar, who had been following the victim, was acquitted. The victim's family received $140,000 as moral compensation. After the verdict was announced, the relatives expressed gratitude to the court for the fair punishment for Gerardo's killers. However, it soon became known that the lawyers for Samadi and Christelle appealed to a higher court to mitigate the sentences. The new trial took place in November 2019. At the same time, the identity of the second killer became known, who, according to Ronald, took part in the massacre but was not privy to the details of the plan. Ronald and Cesar also appealed, hoping to reduce their sentences. As a result, the sentence for each of the participants in the crime was reduced by 5 years. Now, Samadi is serving her 25-year sentence in one of the women's prisons in Costa Rica. As it became known in the summer of 2020, she registered a marriage with a woman she met in prison. Her chosen one's name is Laura Brenes, and at the time of the registration of the relationship, she had already been released on parole, while Samadi will spend almost 2 decades behind bars. Thanks for watching. Smash that like button, drop a comment, and share to help grow the channel. Your support means the world. Catch you next time.